Have you ever wondered why buying land in Nigeria, especially in a place like Lagos, can feel so complicated? All the documents, the fees, the government offices. It's a lot. But to really understand why things are the way they are, we need to take a trip back in time, way before all the paperwork and lawyers we know today. Imagine this, in Nigeria where land wasn't something you bought or sold. It was personal. It was communal. It was your family's heritage, your connection to your ancestors, and your future. There were no certificates of occupancy, no deeds of assignment, no court battles. There was just trust, tradition, and the respected word of the community elders. In those days, land belonged to everyone in the community, collectively. The chiefs and the family heads, they weren't landlords in the modern sense. They didn't own the land. Their role was to be custodians, managing it for the benefit of every single person. If you were a member of the community and you needed a piece of land to farm, to build your home, or to start a small trade, you didn't go to a real estate agent. You went to your family head or the community leaders. They would allocate a portion to you, based on your needs and your standing in the community. This land was yours to use for your lifetime, and you could pass that right of use down to your children. But here's the key difference: it was a right of use, not outright ownership. The idea of selling family or community land to an outsider was almost unthinkable. It would be like selling a piece of your history, a part of your identity. Land was for life. It was for posterity. It was not a commodity for sale. This system was built on a deep social fabric, on relationships and mutual respect that had been woven over generations. Then, everything began to change. The arrival of the British colonialists brought new ideas, new laws, and a completely different way of looking at land. The communal, trust-based system started to clash with a foreign concept of individual ownership and government control. Around the year 1916, this shift became official. The colonial government passed a major piece of legislation called the Land and Native Rights Ordinance. This law was a game-changer, especially for northern Nigeria. It declared that all land in the north was now under the control and disposition of the governor. The colonial government positioned itself as the new trustee, holding the land in trust for the native people. In theory, this sounded protective, but in practice, it transferred ultimate power over land from the traditional rulers and communities to the colonial administration. The local chiefs and emirs, who were once the ultimate custodians, now had their authority significantly reduced. Meanwhile, in the south, things were a bit different. The colonial government didn't impose the same kind of sweeping law, at least not initially. Traditional customs and native laws regarding land tenure were still largely in practice. However, the British influence was creeping in. They started introducing their own systems of land administration alongside the traditional ones. Concepts like individual titles, registered deeds, and formal land surveys started to appear. People, especially those in emerging urban centers like Lagos, began to get government-issued documents to prove their ownership. And you can probably guess what happened next: pure chaos and confusion. You had a situation where one person held a piece of land based on a generations-old traditional claim, passed down through their family. Then, another person would show up with a government-stamped paper, a formal deed, for the very same piece of land. Who was the real owner? The traditional system and the new colonial system were running parallel to each other, often colliding head-on. This created countless disputes, community conflicts, and a legal nightmare that laid the groundwork for many of the land issues we still face today. This period of dual systems and legal uncertainty continued for decades, even after Nigeria gained independence in 1960. The country was grappling with a patchwork of different land laws: customary law in some places, English law in others, and a state-controlled system in the north. It was clear that this fragmented approach was unsustainable. The government needed a unified, nationwide solution to manage land, encourage development, and hopefully, reduce the endless conflicts. That brings us to a monumental year in Nigeria's land history, 1978. Under the military government of Generals Murtala Muhammad and Olusegun Obasanjo, a radical new law was introduced. It was called the Land Use Act. This single piece of legislation aimed to completely overhaul and harmonize the entire system of land tenure across the country. And it changed everything. The core principle of the Land Use Act of 1978 was sweeping and absolute. It vested all land within the territory of each state solely in the hands of the state governor. The governor was to hold this land in trust and administer it for the use and common benefit of all Nigerians. Suddenly, the absolute ownership that families and communities once held was, in legal terms, extinguished. What you could now get was a right of occupancy, granted by the governor, for a specific period, usually 99 years. The goals behind the act were noble and seemed purposeful. The government argued it would make land more accessible for everyone, rich or poor. It was meant to break the hold of traditional land speculators, curb endless litigation over ownership, and make it easier for the government to acquire land for public projects like roads, schools, and hospitals. It was envisioned as a tool for rapid economic development and social equity. But the reality, as is often the case with such grand plans, turned out to be far more complicated. While the intention was to simplify things, the Land Use Act, in many ways, made the process of securing land rights more bureaucratic and, for the ordinary person, often more difficult. Instead of dealing with a community elder you knew, you now had to navigate a complex government ministry. The act gave state governors immense power over land allocation. This concentration of power, unfortunately, opened the door to potential misuse, political favoritism, and administrative bottlenecks. Getting a certificate of occupancy, the ultimate proof of your right to the land, became a long, expensive, and often frustrating process involving multiple layers of government approvals, surveys, and fees. The very system designed to make land accessible could sometimes become a barrier for the very people it was meant to help. So, where does that leave us today? The Land Use Act of 1978 remains the principal law governing land in Nigeria. That journey, from a system of community trust and heritage, to a period of colonial control and legal dualism, and finally to the era of government trusteeship, has been a long and winding road. It's a story of shifting power, competing interests, and the ongoing struggle to balance tradition with modernity. Understanding this history is not just an academic exercise. It's crucial because it helps you see why buying land the right way, especially in a dynamic market like Lagos, matters so much. It explains why due diligence is not just a buzzword, but an absolute necessity. The layers of history have created layers of complexity, and navigating them requires knowledge and care. The legacy of these changes is all around us, in the processes we follow and the potential pitfalls we must avoid. In our next session, we're going to dive deep into what this all means for you, the modern-day land buyer. We'll explore how to navigate today's system effectively, how to conduct proper verification, and most importantly, how to protect your hard-earned investment from scams and title defects. You definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this history insightful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode. See you then.